Hey everyone, Adam here. So in this video, I want to tackle the question, do we really know what we want? Oftentimes we think we know what we want, but I would question, do we really? Now, I myself am 100% guilty of this. Oftentimes I find out that what I thought I wanted, I didn't necessarily want, or it ends up not being what it's all cracked up to be. I get these grand plans and then I'm like, oh, okay, that did not work out the way I had anticipated. I also want to point out I do not have all the answers. And I also understand that this is a completely loaded topic. You could get into these crazy philosophical discussions about this. And I think my approach is going to be a lot more narrow, and it's going to be more of a pragmatic approach, just to talk about it, not necessarily the philosophical depth that it probably should have. So let's get into it. Oftentimes we think that we want a new place to live, a new career, or a new item. So we'll put a plan in motion, we'll acquire it, and then we find out it wasn't nearly as good as what we originally thought or what we thought about in our minds. And we're left maybe a little bit disappointed or feeling like, oh man, was that really worth all that time and energy? Or in some cases you feel worse because maybe the move that you have made is actually worse than what you originally had. So why does this end up being the case? I think there's a few reasons. One, I think it's in our human nature to be kind of restless, or to maybe not be content with what we've already have. And we're always looking for that next best thing that's just around the corner. And I feel that that's human nature. Two, playing off of that, I think there are a lot of companies that I don't know if exploit is too harsh of a word, but there are a lot of companies that that recognize this, and they'll try to take advantage of this to get you to purchase their items or buy into whatever that they're trying to sell. And so when you add it all together, it's no wonder that we're always kind of not content, and we're always looking for the next best thing. So because of that, we're always thinking that we want something else. Now, there are certain situations where we think we want something, and then when we achieve it, we're like, whoa, yeah, I really wanted that. That was totally worth it. I'm so glad I did that. So that's kind of what we're striving for. I want to maybe talk about that, maybe give some tips of how we get there, or at least have a better success rate of getting there. And again, as I said, I am not 100%. I'm not perfect at this. I'm still very much a work in progress. But those are the things that I'm moving towards. I think in the past my success rate was incredibly low, especially with personal items, right? Like I would buy something thinking it's going to solve X, Y, Z. I get it. And then I'm like, whoa, I didn't think that through, or that is not going to be solving the problems that I was hoping it was going to solve. I think a lot of times we have a hard time focusing in on the trade-offs and not weighting the trade-offs properly. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you are looking to switch careers, you're looking to start a new job. And let's say on your current job, you can think of 10 negatives about your job, and there's only 3 pros, right? Not a great situation to be in. And so you apply for a new job, and this job, let's say it has 10 pros, but 5 negatives. And so when you figure it all out, you're like, oh, okay, this new job, it's definitely going to be a step in the right direction, and you go for it. You switch jobs, and you realize, though, after the fact, that one of the pros that your old job had was it had maybe, let's say, a really, really small commute time. Like, let's say you live really close to the place that you worked. And so you had a 10-minute commute. And now, let's say you have an hour commute. And you didn't properly weight that into your calculations. You come to find out you hate commuting, and you didn't think about that when you signed up for your new job. And so that's a perfect example of you not weighting the pros and cons appropriately. If that really, really matters to you, you may find that your current job, even though it has more pros, may be a wash, or doesn't feel like it was the correct move because of that one thing with that long commute. So again, I'm not saying it's easy. It gets very, very tricky, but a lot of times we may not weigh the pros and cons appropriately. We're not giving enough weight to the things that we're looking to really, really prioritize. Or we don't think through all the pros and cons. This has happened to me multiple times where I'll list out all the pros, and I won't think of a couple of negatives, and then later on I'm like, oh, I didn't see that negative. I didn't even think about that. So yeah, that's a bummer. So a tip or suggestion to try to help you figure all of this out is, one, try to figure out all the pros and cons beforehand. I think that goes a long way. Two, after you list out all the pros and cons, try to then weight the pros and cons in a meaningful way, or prioritize them of what's really, really important. And three, if you can, try to, again, every situation is different, but if there's some ways that you can be maybe slightly content with your current situation, think about that. Think like, okay, are there aspects of my current situation that I'm at least content with? And if the answer is no, like if you truly are not content with anything at all, then the answer becomes obvious, right? It becomes very, very easy. It's like, okay, I am totally not content. Hopefully this next move or item or purchase or whatever is going to be better than my current situation, right? Because if you really can't find anything to be content with, then that decision, I think, is a little bit easier. Oftentimes, I think what happens is there is some contentedness there. It's just that we don't realize it until after we've made the switch, right? It's like, oh, I made the switch, and it was like, oh, that other situation wasn't nearly as bad as what I thought it was, or, oh, it really had a lot more pros than what I was letting on. So if you can somehow detach yourself from that and truly find maybe some contentedness in your current situation, that will hopefully give you a better idea if it is worth making that switch. Now, easier said than done. Oftentimes we don't think things through. I know this is something that I am totally guilty of. So let me give you an example. Before we moved to Pittsburgh, or even, first couple of years at Pittsburgh, I was like, I love cross-country skiing, and I was like, man, I love Stowe, Vermont because of all the cross-country skiing. If I could move to Stowe, Vermont, oh my gosh, that is the place I want to be, right? Purely for cross-country skiing. And so, yeah, for the first year or two, I didn't really think through it. I didn't take my own advice. I didn't go through any of these exercises of the pros and cons of where I was currently living. I was just like, man, if there's any opportunity to get to Stowe, Vermont, I got to get there. Now, retrospectively, I haven't moved to Stowe, Vermont, but as I think through it, I don't think it's going to be a huge improvement, or I'm going to be any more happy than what I am currently at. I mean, I would say it would probably be a lateral move at this point. And the reason for it is I think through it, I realize that, okay, I've got a job from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. It gets dark in the wintertime at Stowe, Vermont, I don't know, anywhere between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. So basically that means during the week, I will not probably be doing that much cross-country skiing. That leaves weekends. And sure, I would probably be able to get in a couple hours, maybe on Saturday and maybe a couple hours on Sunday. But again, that gets complicated in the sense that I have to communicate that with my wife, right? Because I have 2 kids. So she would be on kid duty, or we'd have to find a babysitter. And then there's also other kid activities, right? My oldest is in karate, he's in swim. My youngest is thinking about doing karate and possibly swim and maybe even gymnastics. So if I was doing that up at Stowe, Vermont, I don't know how much skiing I would be able to get in, right? Like when I initially thought about this in my mind, I'd be like, yes, I'm going to ski every day instead of run. And I would love to ski every day. But then as I thought about it, just my life circumstances, I don't know how how realistic that would be. So in my mind, I'm like, yes, this is the thing we need to do. I need to get up to Stowe, Vermont. But then as I think through it, I would probably be somewhat disappointed on the cross-country skiing because I wouldn't be able to do it nearly as much as I initially thought. And then as I think about things even more, Pittsburgh has a lot to offer. I have access to, I think it's over like 120 miles of rails to trails for biking, which I don't, to my knowledge, I haven't looked into it. I don't know if Stowe, Vermont offers that much. Within in the Pittsburgh area, these rails to trails are within like 45 minutes or less from my house, which is fantastic. I have tons of opportunity for biking, so I would miss that. Also, in Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh, we have the theater district, and they're doing tons of like Broadway shows, a lot of cultural stuff that I don't think I could get at Stowe, Vermont. And so I guess when you add it all up, I'm completely content where I'm living. I'm happy, content. And I still think I would be content and happy at Stowe, Vermont. It's just that I don't think it would be nearly as much as what I originally thought once I went through all the pros and cons and kind of thought all of this through. Now, with all of this, there are a couple of caveats that you have to think about. One, I am not saying don't take risks. Some of the most life-changing events in my life were taking risks. Moving to Pittsburgh was one of them because I had no job lined up. My wife had her job, but I had nothing. I didn't even know if I was going to like it. I was just like, okay, I guess we're going to Pittsburgh. It was a risk. Because it was a risk, I knew that there was a higher probability that I may not be content or maybe slightly disappointed. But I knew that going in because I recognized that it was a risk. Also, moving to New York City, I'm so glad I did it. I remember as a kid, I said I would never ever move to New York City, and it was a great life-changing experience for me. And so there was a risk. But again, going into it, I knew that I may not like it and all of these things. So if you are going to take a risk, which, I recommend that, I'm not saying don't take risks, just recognize that they are a risk and that there's a higher probability because it's a risk that it may not be what you are originally thinking that it will be. Now, about a year ago, I thought that I would love to do a bike tour for a month. And I'm not ruling it out. I'm not saying that I wouldn't enjoy it. But again, it was one of those things where like, I would love to go on a month-long bike tour. And like in my mind, like as far as a fun factor, I'm giving it like a 10 out of 10 in my mind when I first think about these things. But then as I calm down, I think about it, I weigh the pros and cons, I don't think it would be a 10 out of 10. I mean, it might be an experience of a lifetime, but there are a lot of things that I would certainly miss. I game with my friends once a week, so there'd be 4 sessions that I would miss. And on my bike tour, I would really miss that. I mean, I would be having, I assume, fun on my bike tour, but I would really miss that. I like technology, so not having access to my computers, eventually I would miss that. Obviously, I have kids. I would definitely miss my family. But like, let's say that was all worked out and, my wife was like, yeah, I'm going to watch the kids, for a month. There are other aspects I would miss. I really enjoy strength training and, I would not be able to do that as easily for that month unless I stayed at a hotel during my bike trip and still had the energy after, maybe if I was doing 60-mile days on a bike, still had the energy to do a full body workout or something, right? Like it's just, so there are a lot of aspects that I would miss. And so originally when I was thinking I would love to do a bike tour, I give it a 10. I'm thinking I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. I would probably realize after I think about things through that, again, it's not what's going to be cracked up to be. And, maybe it ends up being a 7 out of 10 because of all the other things that I'm giving up for that month. So again, this is just to give you some perspective, some things to think about whenever you're making big moves, and just really trying to dial in and figure out what you want, and also being content with your life. as much as you can. Again, everyone's situation is different. You may not be content with your life, but I think almost, as I said earlier, in those situations, the decision becomes almost easier because you know if you're not content, then yeah, it's easy. You're just going to make the move. So as I said, this is very much a work in progress for me, and these are kind of my thoughts about trying to figure out what you want and trying to dial things in better. And ultimately, I think the real key is just being more satisfied with the Switch or the item that you acquired, right? I think that that's the real crux of this video, is just after you make the switch or you do what you do, you're like, yeah, you know what? That was worth that time and energy. And I'm so glad I did that. These are just tips and tricks. I'm hoping, again, it's a very narrow look at this, just things to think about and hopefully give you a much higher success rate. And in the end, you're like, ah, man, I'm so glad I did it. It was totally worth it. So, as I said, that's what I'm working on and trying to get better at that. So, I'm going to leave it here. I've rambled on long enough, as always, tend to ramble. But I hope you found this video helpful, and thanks for watching.